Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All good to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, verse 35. The chapter is entitled The Entrance of Lord Krishna into Dwarka. And we are very, very, very close to the end of the chapter and looking forward to jumping to the next one. So without further delay, the class will be given by Vrindavaneshri Radhika from ISKCON, Philadelphia. Without further delay, we'll jump right into it. It's all yours, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Good morning. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girvardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asatari Sata His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asatari Sata His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadar Shiva Sati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Gitar Govardhan Ki Jai. Mayapurdam Ki Jai, Vrindavandam Ki Jai, Jamuna Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai, ISKCON Harrisburg Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Haribol, all glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories the Shikuru and Shikaranga, Hare Haribol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Pashita Deshatarane Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Namartama Devam Sarasvatim Vyasam Chatodayam Radhirayat Nastaprayasya Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. So here we are, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, verse 35. So I'll repeat 3 times and then you can repeat after me. Saisha Nara Lokesmin Avatirna Svamayaya Ramistri Ratna Kustasto Bhagavan Prakrito Yata Saisha Nara Lokesmin Avatirna Svamayaya Ramistri Ratna Kustato Bhagavan Prakrito Yata Saesha Nara Lokismin Avatirna Svamayaya Remi Stri Ratna Kustasto Bhagavan Prakrito Yata. Anyone else?
Sa isha nara lokesmin avatirna svamayaya. Premistri ratna kuttashto bhagavan prakrito yatha.
Great. Someone else like to give it a try? Okay, we'll do word for word then. Sa, he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Esaha, all these. Naraloki, on this planet of human beings. Ashmin, on this. Avatarina, having appeared. Sva, personal, internal. Mayaya, causeless mercy. Remi, enjoyed. Stri Ratna, woman who is competent to become a wife of the Lord. Kutushtaha, among. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Prakrita, mundane. Yatha, as if it were. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by his internal potency and enjoyed himself amongst competent women as if he were engaging in mundane affairs. Purport. The Lord married and lived like a householder. This is certainly like a mundane affair, but when we learn that he married 16,108 wives and lived with them separately in each and every palace, certainly it is not mundane. Therefore, the Lord living as a householder amongst his competent wives is never mundane. His behavior with them is never to be understood as mundane sex relation. The women who become the wives of the Lord are certainly not ordinary women, because to get the Lord as one's husband is the result of many, many millions of births, tapasya, austerity. When the Lord appears on different lokas or planets, or on this planet of human beings, he displays his transcendental pastimes just to attract the conditioned souls to become his external servitors, friends, parents, and lovers, respectively, in the transcendental world, where the Lord eternally reciprocates such exchanges of service. Service is pervertedly represented in the material world and broken untimely, resulting in sad experience. The illusion living being, conditioned by material nature, cannot understand out of ignorance that all our relations here in the mundane world are temporary and full of iniquities. Such relations cannot help us be happy perpetually. But if the same relation is become eternally related with him, and the same relation is established with the Lord, then we are transferred to the transcendental world after leaving this material body and become eternally related with him in the relation we desire. The women amongst whom we live as their husbands are not therefore women of this mundane world, but are eternally related with him as transcendental wives, a position which they attain by perfection of devotional service. That is their competency. The Lord is Param Brahma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Conditioned souls seek after perpetual happiness in all places, not only on this earth, but also on other planets throughout the universe. Because constitutionally, a spiritual spark, as he is, can travel to any part of God's creation. But being conditioned by the material modes, he tries to travel in space by spacecraft and so fails to reach his destination. The law of gravitation is binding upon him like the shackles of a prisoner. But by other processes, he can reach anywhere. But even if he reaches the highest planet, he cannot attain that perpetual happiness for which he is searching life after life. When he comes to his senses, however, he seeks the Brahman happiness, knowing it for that unlimited happiness, which he is seeking, is never attainable in this material world. As such, the Supreme Being, Parabrahman, certainly does not seek his happiness anywhere in the material world, nor can his paraphernalia of happiness be found in this material world. He is not impersonal. Because he is the leader and Supreme Being amongst innumerable living beings, he cannot be impersonal. He is exactly like us, and he has all the propensities of an individual living being in fullness. He marries exactly like us, but his marriage is neither mundane nor limited by our experience in the conditioned state. His wives, therefore, appear like mundane women, but factually they are all transcendental liberated souls, perfect manifestations of internal energy. Om Gyana Tamaranjashya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalatam Yena Tashme Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitami Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svatvadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Vanchakalpa Tarubhishya Kripa Sindhu Vichapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavi Purnamam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasai Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Charma Swami Nityanamane Sankta Chaita Supanita Bhagavan Trasapun Gadapranam Bhakti Charapanam. So I'll read the translation again. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by his internal potency and enjoyed himself amongst competent women as if he were engaging in mundane affairs. So in this purport, there's a couple of, and in this verse in particular, we know that Krishna has come. He's here in Dwarka. He's carrying out different activities and pastimes. He was greeted very enthusiastically with all of the oblations and all of the worship that goes along with the Lord appearing. And so it's describing some of his pastimes here now. And one of them is that he seemingly behaved as a householder. And what does that look like when he seemingly appears and is carrying out activities as if he were a human being? And there's actually, when I read this initially, the verse that came to my mind immediately from Bhagavad Gita is a very well-known verse. I'll just read the translation. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. This is Bhagavad Gita 9:11. And Prabhupada's purport on this verse, this Bhagavad Gita verse, is very important, I think, to meditate on, because it's when speaking to different scholars of the Vedas or various, let's say, impersonalists who believe that Krishna appeared in a physical form and was as a human. Prabhupada and also the Vedas, when read properly, explain that in fact this is a foolish perspective. Okay, it's very foolish to think that Krishna is actually carrying out these activities the same that we would, right? Because Krishna is spiritual. These are his spiritual energies, and we are intermixed with the material energies. So they can't possibly be the same. So in the purport for this verse, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. So this directly connects to this Srimad Bhagavatam verse. And I'll read a little bit of the purport to give some more context from Srila Prabhupada. From the other explanations of the previous verse in this chapter, it is clear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing like a human being, is not a common man. The personality of Godhead, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the complete cosmic manifestation, cannot be a human being. Yet there are many foolish men who consider Krishna to be merely a powerful man and nothing more. Actually, he is the original Supreme Personality, as is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna. He is the Supreme Lord. There are many Ishvaras, controllers, and one appears greater than the other. In the ordinary management of affairs in the material world, we find some official or director, and above him there is a secretary, and above him a minister, and above him a president. Each of them is a controller, but one is controlled by another. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that Krishna is the supreme controller. There are many controllers, undoubtedly, both in the material and spiritual world, but Krishna is the supreme, Ishvara Param Krishna, and his body is Satchit Ananda, non-material. So here Prabhupada is giving us a very clear understanding that he's the supreme and his body is not material. And this is where the confusion can come in for a lot of people. They see, okay, this man, this young boy, this baby appears. He's carrying out these different activities. But even when he was in Vrindavan and he lifted up the Govardhan Hill with his pinky, or he killed all of the demons, he carried out all of these tremendous acts. And Mother Yashoda, even because she was covered by Yogamaya, which is the beautiful potency of Krishna that enables her to have that relationship, the Vatsalya mother relationship, parental relationship with Krishna. She's covered over and she's thinking, oh, he's just a boy. He it was because of my prayers to Lord Narayan that he was able to carry out all these fantastic, that he was protection. It seemed like it was my little boy, but it was actually my prayers to Narayan that saved him. And now what's the difference between Mother Yashoda saying these things and the average person, the average scholar, the average, impersonalist? Why is that different? And we can meditate on this. Like, why would that be any different if Mother Yashoda thinks he's just a boy? Why is that different than someone saying he's just a man here? He has a very strong and powerful man, but he's just a human. Well, the reason that this is different, and it's explained that Mother Yashoda is part of Krishna's pastimes. Mother Yashoda is spiritual. She is an expansion. She has done many austerities to have Krishna as her son. And we know at one point she's trying to clear dirt out of his mouth and she can see the universe. And so, but she still doesn't believe it. She still doesn't want to recognize anything that might be contradictory to her thinking that Krishna is my boy, Krishna is my son. And this is different because this Vatsalya, this rasa, this relationship that Mother Yashoda has with Krishna is one of the highest. And again, like I said, this is the Yoga Maya. There's two sides of the coin with Maya, right? We hear about, oh, they're Maya, oh, Maya this, Maya that, right? And we always just assume Maya is related to material energies. There's Mahamaya, one side of the coin, and you flip the coin and there's Yoga Maya, right? Mahamaya and Yoga Maya are one and the same. It's just what she's bringing you to. So Mahamaya brings you deeper into material energies. And it's that Mahamaya, that perspective and the coverings of Maya that would cause one to think he's just a man. He's just a strong man. But we already know that Mother Yashoda is taken over by Yoga Maya. And Yoga Maya is the internal potencies of Krishna. And the internal potencies of Krishna are spiritual. Mahamaya is governed by the external potencies of the Lord and the internal, but the external, and that is more the material energies. They're all under Krishna's arrangements, right? The material and spiritual energies are all part of Krishna's arrangement. They're all part of Krishna's energies. It's just what we're being controlled by. So in the material energies, we're being controlled by the three modes of material nature: mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance, right? And under Yoga Maya, we are being controlled by Krishna, right? That's the difference. And so, and the goal is to ultimately, hopefully, come to the position that, we are turning our backs on Mahamaya and saying, and praying that Yoga Maya engages us in Krishna's energies, in spiritual energies. And that, and actually in Brahma Samhita, I've spent a lot of time meditating on this verse in Brahma Samhita, and I think it's verse 44. I don't have it pulled up off the top of my head. I think it's verse 44 that talks about the potencies of Maya. And it says that Mahamaya, the material energies of Maya, when one shows desire, when one shows a desire to cultivate a relationship with the Lord, it is Maya, Mahamaya, that delivers us to the Lord. Pretty cool, huh? So we just have to be very clear on what we want. We have to be very clear on what we're looking for in our lives. So a little bit of a diversion from the purport. So I'll go back to talking about the difference of how Krishna is being seen as a human versus a spiritual, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here in this purport, Prabhupada says material bodies cannot perform the wonderful acts described in previous verses. So it's describing so many of Krishna's potencies. His body is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Although he is not a common man, the foolish deride him and consider him to be a man. His body is called here Manusham because he is acting just like a man, a friend of Arjuna's, a politician involved in the battle of Kurukshetra. In so many ways, he is acting just like an ordinary man, but actually his body is Satchit Ananda Vigraha, eternal bliss and knowledge absolute. This is confirmed in the Vedic language also. Satchit Ananda Rupaya Krishnaya. I offer my obeisances under the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who is the eternal, blissful form of knowledge. And this is from the Gopala Tapani Upanishad. There are other descriptions in the Vedic language also. Tam ekam govindam, you are Govinda, the pleasure of the senses and the cows. Satchit ananda vigram, and your form is a transcendental, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. So how is this? So again, how is this happening? So Prabhupada explains, despite the transcendental qualities of Lord Krishna's body, it's full of bliss and knowledge. There are so many so-called scholars and commentators of Bhagavad Gita who deride Krishna as an ordinary man. The scholar may be born an extraordinary man due to his previous work, but this conception of Krishna is due to poor fund of knowledge. Therefore, he's called Muda, or foolish person, which considers Krishna to be an ordinary human. The foolish consider Krishna an ordinary human because they do not know the confidential activities of the Supreme Lord and his different energies. They do not know that Krishna's body is a symbol of complete knowledge and bliss, and that he is the proprietor of everything that be, and that he can award liberation to anyone. Because they do not know that Krishna has so many transcendental qualifications, they deride him. So here in this purport here, we're seeing the mundane affairs, the seemingly mundane affairs of the Lord. He has 16,108 wives, and oh my God, people will jump on this like, like white on rice. I mean, people really that don't understand the Vedas, and they don't understand Bhagavatam. They're like, Krishna was a polygamist, clearly, no. And it's a really complex topic, and I'm not qualified to speak on it, but I know that it's a complex topic, and I know that Krishna's expansions, right, and his internal potency, Krishna can expand himself unlimitedly. But he expands himself for those very special 16,000 women. They have done something very special to have been able to achieve Krishna as their husband. And he doesn't just have them all in one big mansion. They each have separate lives with Krishna. And this is the expansion, right? Even in the Rasa dance, each of the gopis is dancing with Krishna. How's that possible? Because it's Krishna. He can expand himself unlimitedly, right? I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We have a tiny spark of Krishna in our hearts, a super soul. So there's that expansion, right? So why couldn't he expand his full form 16,000 times? That's conceivable, when you think about God in our hearts. God is the Paramatma, the super soul, this the Narayana that's in the form Narayan that's in our hearts. This is Krishna. This is what we have in a super soul guiding us in our spiritual activities. This is also the super soul that's observing our activities. And when we choose to engage in material activities, kind of sits back, and just observes. So, but this is all Krishna. So these 16,000 wives, 16,108 wives should be nothing so strange when we think about how Krishna expands himself. And why, it's the natural relationship of Krishna to have his female energies, right? Krishna always comes with his other half. He has Radharani. So when he expands himself, he's expanding always with the female potency as well. So he has those 16,000 wives that are also the expansions of him with the female potency. And so we can, explore that a little bit too. Now, Prabhupada spoke a fair amount on this actually. And, he's given a variety of lectures on the fact that Krishna was married to these 16,000 wives. And there's one, when he was giving a lecture in Germany in 1974, he says, everyone marries, but Krishna, being the supreme person, he marries 16,108 women. But it's not that he remained one husband for 16,000 wives. He made arrangements for providing the 16,000 wives in different palaces. Each palace there is described, they were made of first-class marble, stone, and furniture made of ivory, and the sitting place made very nice soft cotton. In this way, there's his description. So he's saying this is part of what Prabhupada was speaking on. Krishna is accepted by the authorities as Bhagavan, or the supreme personality of Godhead. And what is Bhagavan? Bhagavan means that one who is fully equipped with 6 opulences. Fully equipped with all opulences means Bhagavan is the richest personality. How much rich Bhagavan or God can we understand that we are proud of possessing a few acres of land? And Bhagavan means who is proprietor of the whole universe. So, all of creation, he's proprietor of all of creation. So when Krishna is present on this planet, he proved all these opulences possessed by him. And one example is that Krishna, being the supreme person, married 16,108 women. But it is not that he remained, and this is where it comes out, is not that he remained one husband for 16,000 wives. He made these separate arrangements. So we can see that he was living in that way with each and every wife. He expanded himself into 16,000 expansions, personal expansions. And Prabhupada said, it's not a difficult task for God, right? God is to be situated everywhere. So this is what's the difficulty, right? Why even question it? Why should it even come up for discussion? Because God can expand himself in so many different ways. So here we have in this purport, this understanding. So we're building this understanding that Krishna is not, even though he comes here in the material world, he is not an ordinary person. Even though he has these 16,000 wives, this is not a mundane relationship. This is a relationship that is extremely transcendental. And it is a relationship that proves, again, that he's Bhagavan, because he can expand himself in such a way. So, when we start to read through these things, and we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it's something that we take lifetimes to truly dive into and get a deep understanding of. But with each time we study the Bhagavatam and each class we attend, the hope is that we're starting to get a really clear picture on who God is, who his associates are, who his devotees are, and what our relationship is in all of this too, right? And so through that study, we can see that, we are still here in this material world. We have our material struggles. And Prabhupada points out here, even we try to travel to space. And Prabhupada has often talked about the space race, I guess, going to the moon back in the 60s. That was a big deal during Prabhupada's time. And he talked about that. He's like, they're just going to the moon. That's not so far, right? What are they doing? They physically go to the moon, but that's as far as they can get, right? And but they still have to come back and they're still in the material energies because they still can't see anyone occupying the moon. They can't see anyone occupying the sun. They can't, so we're experiencing the other planets, we're experiencing the solar system, but we're seeing it through material vision. And we're still in our material body with our material mind experiencing these things. Now we have the transcendental space traveler, Narada Muni. This took me a minute. Narada Muni, probably call him the transcendental space traveler. Now, Narada Muni is a different story. Narada Muni can go all over the place because why? Well, because he's transcendental. He's a Muni. He's a great sage, but he's traveling not in the way that we would think. So he's traveling within the spiritual energies, and that's a very different traveling experience. That's right. We're not gonna go get a ticket, catch a flight. He's just right, and he's going to these different places because he is very elevated. And this is some of the, through these tapasyas, through some of these austerities that he's had over lifetime after lifetime or lifetime, that he has these abilities. He has these yoga siddhis, these mystic powers. And Narada Muni is a great sage too. I mean, Narada Muni shows up at all kinds of fun spots in Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes he's stirring the pot a little bit. Sometimes he's there to kind of facilitate. He helps with when Dhruva he ran away. And he was 4 years old and he wanted to be king so bad. And he was not favored by his mother, his stepmother, his stepmother, who was more closer in line with the king. His mother was not, and he was not favored. And it was very upsetting to him that he was not accepted. And so he ran away. He wanted to be in charge. He wanted to be king. He wanted the whole kingdom. And so he went out, and imagine a 4-year-old going out into the woods and just camping out there for a while out of protest. And, he was going to try and meditate until he get the whole kingdom. And Narada Muni shows up and starts instructing him. So he's there. He shows up in a lot of different places instructing. So he's, like I said, he's throughout the Vedas, very timeless, because we can see the timeline of the Vedas, and yet Narada Muni kind of just shows up at various different points in timelines. So that means he's also spiritual. So I'm getting a little off topic here, but just to kind of emphasize the point that even in our conditioned, state and these material energies, as much as we want to do these things, as much as we try, we can't, because we're not God, and because we're still bound by these modes of material nature. And that is the one of the things that I think is the most confounding, because we become very bewildered in this situation. We become very bewildered in this situation of wanting to have these potencies and wanting to have these spiritual energies, but the modes of material nature continue to play out. And the modes of material nature, as we know from Bhagavad Gita, are fighting for control. They're always, the mode of ignorance is trying to overtake mode of passion. The mode of passion is trying to overtake mode of goodness. So there's so many struggles. But God doesn't have these. Krishna doesn't have these struggles, right? Because he's God. If Krishna were in mundane relationships with those 16,108 wives, there would certainly be struggles, right? Anyone that's married knows that, marriage is challenging. There's struggles, but he's beyond that, because these are transcendental relationships. Now there might be transcendental struggles, right? And we've learned about some of the transcendental, Krishna and Radharani and that sweetness in their relationship. But that's the transcendental longing or the yearning, or he'll play tricks on Radharani, or, he'll go away and she's pining for him. Right. But these are all spiritual struggles, and we can have a mimicking of those struggles here in the material world. And that's, the thing Prabhupada often says is that the material energies are just a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, because the spiritual, if it did not occur in the spiritual world, it wouldn't occur here, because the spiritual world is the highest. It is the original source of everything. So there's no way that we could have something unique in the material world that doesn't exist in the spiritual world in some form or fashion. And so, and this is, like I said, this is bringing back to the understanding of Krishna. Everything he's doing, it seems that's why we can get confused, because Krishna's activities do seem similar to ours. So it can be very confusing, understandably, right? We see God getting married. We see God stealing butter when he's a baby and playing with the monkeys, wrestling. We see God fighting, doing a chariot, guiding a chariot. We see God doing all of these seemingly very human things. And so it's like I said, it's quite natural that we might be a little confused about the situation, but there's so many different perspectives that we can have of God. We can have the perspective of God, which is kind of the Brahman, the Brahman effulgence, right? And if we're maintaining just that perspective, that there's this the God's energies, and you hear, maybe some people on different spiritual paths might talk about merging with, the spiritual energies. Some people might say, instead of saying God, they'll say the universe, because that's very impersonal. And it's just the energies, and it's a very vague thing, right? But on our path, and those aren't wrong, and Prabhupada explains those aren't wrong. Those are just different understandings of God's energies. But on our path, we're in a personal path. So it's very important, because we're on a personal path and we acknowledge Bhagavan, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because of that, we have to It's critical. We have to understand when we see Krishna mentioned as a husband or a kshatriya or as a little boy, we have to understand that this is not as a human, because it could be very confusing. Now, if we were just in the in that Bhagavan, in that Brahman effulgence state, not Bhagavan, but if we were just in that Brahman effulgence mentality, then, okay, yeah, fine. But we're here, we know that we are trying to engage in a personal relationship with the personal form of God. And that means that we have to take time to understand what that looks like, what that means. And so this is one of the reasons also that we take, we put ourselves into studying Bhagavad Gita, and we put ourselves into studying Srimad Bhagavatam, because it helps us understand Krishna's Bhagavan relationship, that aspect of him, which is the highest. We know that Bhagavan, Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the highest understanding of the Lord. Like I said, the others aren't wrong at all. They're not. They're fine. And someone can stay in that understanding for lifetimes. There's nothing wrong with that. They won't get the same outcome with their spiritual activities, but in our understanding of why we come to Bhakti yoga is a very specific practice. It's a practice of having a relationship. And it's very hard to have a relationship with universe, with unknown, vast energies of God. What are you having a relationship with, But in Bhakti, we are having a relationship with the person of God, the personality of God. And for the personality of God to be engaged in a relationship, he has to have qualities. He has to have activities and pastimes that we can understand in that relationship. And so hopefully this helps to, provide some context around this verse a little bit, because Prabhupada says, his last couple sentences, he says, he's not impersonal. He's a leader and a supreme being amongst innumerable living beings. He cannot be impersonal. He's exactly like us, and he has all the propensities of an individual living being in fullness. He marries exactly like us, but his marriage is neither mundane nor limited by experiencing the conditioned state. So this is because otherwise, if it didn't exist within Krishna's realm, we couldn't have it here. If Krishna didn't marry, if Krishna didn't have activities, then how could we have it here? Because nothing we can have in this material energy can be novel. It's impossible. If Krishna is creating everything, if Krishna is the one governing all energies, it's impossible for anything in this material energy to be novel. So it has to exist in the spiritual world. And this is giving us the examples. It exists in the spiritual world. And these energies, understanding how these energies translate to what we experience here is it's critical. So I'm going to take a pause there and just invite some conversation. We have, 15 minutes to maybe have some discussion. And I welcome, I know everyone's a little shy on the chat or speaking up, but if you want to just put a comment in the chat, that's fine too. And that'll just kind of get a discussion going. So don't be shy. If even just something pops in your head or a question, just toss it in the chat if you don't want to unmute. So.
Thank you so much, Vrindavaneshwari. Such a wonderful class. And I really liked your many points you mentioned, but I do like the last point, which was actually very nice reflection, I felt, where you were describing, when I think you were actually reading from Srila Prabhupada's purport, where he said that, he's not impersonal because he's the leader, being amongst innumerable living beings, he's not impersonal. But I also liked how you, said that it's, if there's marriage in the spiritual world, that's why we have it here. If not, it's not going to exist. And then I remember reading somewhere up in this verse where Srila Prabhupada said that service is pervertedly represented in the material world.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a sad experience. But yeah, so it's, so we know that whatever is in the spiritual world is the perverted reflection and is reflecting in the material world. So that was for me, it was like, geez, and I it's like I've heard that before many, many times. But to think of marriage. Oh yes, it's a perverted reflection that we see in the material world. But when Krishna does it, it's very, very, very pure.
Yeah, because he is God, so everything is pure. It's in those spiritual energies, and so we can't mimic. We can't think that we can have those same relationships. We can appreciate the splendor of the spiritual energies, and we can feel gratitude. And here in the spirit, in the material world, we try to bring Krishna into our lives in a way that enhances our material activities. And that's really, we can bring God in, but we can't mimic his activities. And this is, Prabhupada's made that point many times. We can't go out, marry 16,000 spouses, right? Or even 4. It's just not done. You can't do that, right? You can't, think that you're going to lift, as Prabhupada said, oh, you think you're God? Go ahead and just lift that table with your pinky. Prabhupada would go to these lectures, and he'd have some people, this is in the 60s and 70s, and they'd be like, I am God. And Prabhupada's like, that's fine. Prove it. And they can't, right? So this is trying to mimic God isn't going to get us anywhere, right? And in the sense, Prabhupada often says, and Krishna also says it too, that there is a jealousy, right? When we have envy of God, then we think we can become God. And when we have reverence of God, then we have surrender and faith and worship of God. And that's the difference. We have to get rid of any envy of trying to be God, because that doesn't get us anywhere. Because we can't. It's just smoke screen. It's just a lie, right? We can't be God. We have God in our hearts. Like I said, God expands, unlimitedly. So we've God in our hearts, but we can't be God in the sense that Krishna is God. We can't be the supreme personality of Godhead. This won't happen. There's one. There's Krishna, and that's it. So, any other thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for that. Would like to ask devotees, please do jump right in with your questions or comments, reflection, the takeaway, anything that's popping in your mind as we, from what we have heard. Please do not feel shy. It's not a right or wrong answer. We get a pass or fail certificate. So please, do jump right in and ask, share your thoughts. There's one question, and I don't know. It's a question, I think, or a thought that, people just in general, face, or even devotees, where Srila Prabhupada said such relations cannot help us be happy perpetually.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we know it, but we really struggle with it.
Yeah.
It's like we know it, and we, hands down, even know the verse, happiness or distress, be equipoise, as in Bhagavad Gita, but somehow we just can't deal with it. And that has been, I think, a challenging situation for devotees, what to speak of, those who are not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's our state. It's as long as we're in these material energies, we're going to have struggles. And I think trying to deny those struggles can be a very painful experience, more painful than just experiencing the struggles, in my opinion. I mean, I think that if we try and think that somehow we can be beyond all of these struggles, and then we can become very frustrated. And that frustration creates a lot of internal turmoil. And so I think part of it is just accepting the struggles that come with the material world, and accepting them as all part of the, we ended up in this material body for some reason due to past karma, and accepting the fact that these struggles, we can't try harder. We can't leapfrog our way into, Goloka Vrindavan, like we're still here in this material energies. And as long as we're here in this material body until we leave, we're still carrying out karma still has its influences on us, and so do the material energies. And the goal is to accept that, I think, in my opinion, is to accept that those energies are there, to accept the suffering is there, to accept the difficulties are there, and to continue to keep our compass pointed on K. And as long as we keep ourselves, focused on the relationship with Krishna, knowing that there are difficulties along the way, of devotee or not, that ultimately we will come to some better place, still with struggles, but a better place in those struggles. And that's the goal, in my opinion, that we just continue to work toward building our relationship with Krishna, and he will reciprocate through his causeless mercy, and so that's part of the process. It's the daily understanding of our relationship, the daily practice, the daily surrender as much as we can to the struggles and difficulties that come along with material life. And it's just some thoughts.
Yeah, and what was coming to my mind is that that there's always an expectation, knowing that we can never be happily perpetually in this material world, but still there's this expectation. Yes, but like, yes, I get that. Yes, I know we are fallen conditioned souls. Yes, I know we are, we live in this world where it's, the dualities are always going to be there. We can't escape it. We just can't escape it, but at the same time, but it's like, okay, but a little bit expectation may not hurt, like that kind of a mentality. So I was just really reflecting on that sentence by Srila Prabhupada, how that, and then he says, then we are transferred to the transcendental world after leaving this material body and become eternally related with him in relationship with desire. So I was just wondering, wow, so because, like Srila Prabhupada was mentioning here, like, the illusioned living being conditioned by material nature cannot understand out of ignorance. And I think that is the key word. That's, that I think, knowing that we cannot be happy perpetually, but we have the expectations. I'm thinking with my limited knowledge, that's because there's still some ignorance, knowing that, I should be able to expect,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And your point about happiness, it's because we want to be happy. Who doesn't want to be happy? It's just understanding too that the happiness is not, it has a timeline. It has a limitation to it when we're experiencing material happiness. And, I think that's part of the difference between kind of a material perspective and a spiritual perspective is the happiness. When we have a material perspective, we are shocked when the happiness goes away. Most oftentimes, unless one's a kind of a fatalist and just like, oh, everything's going to just end terribly. But, the happiness, we think, oh, this is going to last forever. But unfortunately, in this material energies, it doesn't, because everything's temporary and cyclical and goes away, and we have suffering, and it's a mixed bag. So it's only when our happiness is tied to the Lord that we can truly understand deep happiness and permanent happiness, perpetual happiness. So.
And I think, one way that's coming, another thought that's coming to my mind is one way to probably begin to really understand that there isn't forever happiness in this material world, as only until when we are eternally related with the Lord. And I think, while we are stuck in this material world, I think the one way to probably experience some tinge of happiness is to engage ourselves in service, and come together with devotees, chanting together, reading, hearing, learning. I think that is the methods I'm thinking personally that will help us to know, okay, this is really sweet, as you said.
Yeah.
You know, just
Absolutely.
coming together, reading, hearing, chanting, engaging in devotional service is so sweet that, yes, it's crazy out there. But once I'm with the devotees and once I'm discussing, it's like, wow, thank you, Krishna, for this amazing Sangha or something like that, you know,
Mhm.
that keeps us going. I feel just that little inkling of devotional service and sadhu Sangha and reading and chanting with devotees. I feel that that is, you know, drops of nectar that helps us to face this crazy world
Mhm.
day in and day out. That's what's coming to my mind.
Oh, it's beautiful. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other
Any
thoughts?
thoughts from devotees? Yes. Any reflections? Any you know, takeaways? That's a really powerful. Yes, Nitya Gopal, go right ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji Dandat Pranam, yes, Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, I was thinking on this relation cannot help us to be happy perpetually. But at the same time, we are in this material world and we have some kind of responsibilities as a material, as a living.
Yep.
We cannot ignore them or we cannot, reject them.
Nope.
So, yeah, but if you add the Krishna in there, then they will be complete.
Exactly. So true. So true, Prabhu. It's bringing spiritual Krishna into our lives, bringing Krishna into our activities. We Krishnaize it, right? As best as we can. Dovetailing is what Prabhupada has always said. We dovetail our activities so that they are bringing Krishna into it. We're doing some sort of service for the Lord. And yeah, 100%. Yeah, we can't just stop our activities. That's, we are humans, we are naturally active beings. So we have to maintain activity. So thank you. Very excellent point.
Thank you, Mataji.
That was a nice point. Yes, how to Krishnaize our activities, even if it's something material, how to Krishnaize it, seeing Krishna in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, yeah, we have responsibility and we can't ignore it. Absolutely not. That's why we're here in this material world. Absolutely. Very nice point, Nitya Gopal. Thank you for sharing that. Very nice. Any other points from devotees? Any questions, any comments, any reflections, any takeaways? Okay, if there isn't, we thank you all for joining us and thank you for this wonderful class and really giving us food for thought, Vrindavaneshwari, about, temporary happiness and spiritual and permanent happiness, I think is what this is, temporary happiness and permanent happiness and how we balance them both and shoot for the highest.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you to all the devotees for joining us. Vanchakrapatibhyascha, Kripa Sindhubevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Have a wonderful
Have
day.
a wonderful day. You too, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Okay.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.